All right, welcome back to another episode of Sky U Pod. Joining us is Tori and Joel from 12 Saturdays. They are our Hawkeye affiliate through the College Huddle. Here to preview the Floyd of Rosedale game. Guys, how are you doing?
Well, Tory Brecht here. We're doing pretty well. It took some time to get over the loss to Iowa State in really ridiculous fashion. In 59 minutes, it felt like Iowa was going to win that game. So that's a real gut punch against a rival. Kind of beat up on a little bit of a tomato can for Iowa last year, although the defense uncharacteristically gave up some big plays. So that's a little concerning. And so I'd say we're kind of on edge heading into Big Ten play here. I don't know. How do you feel about the start of the season, Joel?
When it comes to this week, I feel like I'm in the movie Network, and I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it anymore. I'm still so angry and frustrated about how this game ended last year, and the the blemish that it was on what was really a solid year for the Hawkeyes. And we have talked a little bit before the show. I have a unique and irrational and probably borderline. I'm going to be on a list somewhere for my frustration and hatred for the head football coach at the University of Minnesota. So this one's a big one for me. We'll just put it that way.
It's hate week, so all those emotions are welcome.
I don't
You
get
know,
the "we hate Iowa" thing that you guys do when you're not playing Iowa. Can you explain that to me? And because maybe I can bring some sanity to the Iowa fan base by hearing it from
sure,
Gophers.
it's just to poke at our rivals, I think. I don't know if this is true, but because, I'm, of course but with the Iowa goalpost game, supposedly that's the start of it.
Oh,
So,
really? I was there.
supposedly, I don't remember because I was 7. I don't think I was at that
Oh
game
my God, I
actually.
was a
But
sophomore in college.
oh, sorry. Well,
Dude, I was like 26. So,
yeah.
no, I was at that game and I got hammered because that was the first time I was able to buy beer at a college game because they didn't let you back
Oh
then. That's how
boy,
long ago that was. And
Dave,
yeah,
these are
no,
great guys. So
we
Dave
tried to
chimes in
take that
already
thing.
about the
We tried to
invalid
take that thing
sarcasm.
right out of the. We tried to take that thing right out of the stadium, and they buzzed a big
Yes.
horn at us. It was terrible.
As a
Yeah.
football official, Dave, I can. I actually am an official, and I know the difference between invalid and fair, but whatever.
Yeah. So that's where it starts. So I gotta imagine, Iowa should take it as it's a loving gesture to show that we're rivals, we're important, we're meant to be together in a way, out on the gridiron, that is.
It's
Um,
kind of like buddies who just can't be nice to each other, but they really like
yeah.
love each other deep down inside. It's like you say the worst possible things to the people you're closest to. Is that what we're saying? Since our
Yes, yes. Love
borders
and hate
allied,
are close emotions, right? I think is what they say. So, um,
since there's no rivers that separate us, we have to separate it with hate speech.
exactly, exactly. Um, but yes, let's get into it. We already talked about last year's, end of sequences. I just want to add this. You mentioned the Iowa State game. Is there any pressure or angst by the fans to get this trophy since Iowa State got the Cyhawk a couple weeks
Oh,
ago?
for me, absolutely. I actually have four little mini replicas, and I have to lay one down when they lose. So, it's a bad year when you get, one or more of them
Sure.
laying down. The year you get all four of them standing up is a good year. So, yeah, no, rivalry trophies matter to me. Again, being the aging myself as the oldest Gen Xer here. Um, yeah, regional rivalries are what make college football the best sport in the world, in my opinion. And so, yeah, it matters.
And I think growing up for me, as I guess I'm the elder millennial here, the I was 16 when I saw Iowa State beat Iowa for the first time, and so the Minnesota rivalry was always a much bigger deal growing up in my formative years. So this one's always kind of one that I have circled on the schedule, and I do miss it not being at the end of the season like it used to always be. The Iowa State rivalry is different. I think that the feelings are different because there is so much writing.
Less
Well,
respect, I
but
think.
there's just so much writing, I think, on the fan base's rest of their year, how that game goes. Because like for the company I work for, it's a situation where it's like I have a bunch of Iowa State fans that I work with, and so it's like, oh god, work's gonna suck on Monday. I work with one Gopher fan, like that one,
Sure.
and they don't really care. So it's like it's one of those things where it's not as saturated with everyday life. So and I think that's why the Iowa State game is a tighter rivalry because there's a lot of kids who either grew up Cyclones or grew up Hawkeyes, and they're playing in that game. I know Iowa's got a starter, Y.A. Black, who's from Marshall, Minnesota.
Okay.
Other than that, I don't know that we have any other Minnesotans in the two deep. So it's not very common that Minnesota has an Iowa-born kid on the roster. And it's not very common that Minnesota has an Iowa guy on it.
Yeah. No, well said. And Minnesota has that with Wisconsin too, right? There's just a lot of Wisconsin people in the state, and we play them in every pro sport too.
And we have a Power 5 university in our state with Iowa State and Iowa.
Right.
Minnesota doesn't have that. There's no Bemidji State Gopher game going on. There's no Beavers Gophers battle. So you don't have that.
Right. Dave has another question here for you guys. Who do you hate more now, Minnesota or Nebraska?
I think what you're doing there, Dave, is you're comparing Japan and Germany in World War II.
Okay, for me, it's not even close. Like, I respect Minnesota as like an actual Big Ten school, for realizing that, yes, they did win some championships in the past and were pretty damn good, but don't think they're God's gift to football now. They know where they are. So, no, Nebraska is eminently more hateable. It's a worse state. It's a worse state of mind. It's worse everything. That's how I feel. And the fishing sucks.
Hey, that's a good point.
Minnesota has far more redeeming qualities as an overall state. And the rivalry is a more fun rivalry. I went to college on the Iowa-Nebraska border. I have no love for anything in Husker Nation at all.
Okay.
I have friends that if Nebraska had been in the Big Ten, there were probably two guys in my wedding party who wouldn't have been in my wedding party. We'll just put it that way. Like it would have been bad. It would have been strained friendships. There would have been lots of camo beer, which is a beer you can only get in Nebraska.
I bet it's awful, isn't it?
It's terrible, but it's like 7%.
No, they're awful runzas. Do you know what a runza is? It's like some kind of horrible Hot Pocket with like dog food in it. What is wrong with those people?
It's just caraway seeds and diarrhea. That's all runza is.
Maybe that's
sorry, Dave. You kind of triggered me. Sometimes that.
Well, if anyone came in,
all right.
If anyone came and
these poor guys, like, why did we invite these Iowa guys? They're lunatics.
No. I feel like if anyone came and expected the Gopher fans and the Iowa fans to be talking crap to each other, they're probably just staying for both sides, just trashing Nebraska. So,
Dave, I don't hate Scott Frost. I miss Scott Frost. I loved when Scott Frost ran the Nebraska program. That was great.
Yeah, that's the bad thing. We don't need to belabor the Nebraska point much longer, but I think all of us can probably agree Matt Rule could be a problem in that job.
Yeah, I was disappointed as soon as they hired him. Absolutely. All right, let's get into
moving
it.
on.
Sorry. Max, go ahead. Lead us off with the questions.
Yeah, I think my first question, new offensive coordinator this year for Iowa. We see Brian Ferentz no longer with the team. I guess
you can say what it was. He got fired. He got fired.
He got poop canned.
He's fired.
He got put down behind the shed out back.
No, he was fired by Beth Getz, the athletic director, former Minnesota interim athletic director, Beth Getz, who we're fans of. I'm a fan of Beth Getz. That's not pejorative at all. I actually really like what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, your guys' thoughts in general. Like, what have you seen different so far? What are you guys concerned with? Pros and cons?
One of the nice things about our podcast is that I'm more of the touchy-feely, ephemeral fan guy, and Joel actually has played and coached college football, so he can answer the X's and O's part.
Small college. I'm not a Power 5 guy.
But I will say, just from a fan perspective, you can already feel a little bit of a difference. Like last year and the year before, but especially last year, every single time Iowa had the ball, it felt like a minor miracle if they could get 3 or 4 yards. Sometimes it felt like a minor miracle that they could like cleanly handle a snap and run a play that didn't lose yards. Like that was kind of, you know, at long stretches they could barely get out of their way. This year there's a semblance. There's something going on. Like they're making plays, they're running roughshod, they're opening holes. They're actually sometimes protecting the quarterback, and the quarterback is once in a while making accurate passes. Iowa is approaching being slightly below average at offensive football. And if that is the case and they shore up their defense to its normal self, they're going to be really, really hard to beat. So I think it's working.
I'm a big fan of it so far. Now, Tori is an award-winning journalist, and he's a brilliant writer, and he may be a little hyperbolic on how quote-unquote sluggish and abysmal they were last year on offense. The biggest thing is the quarterback position was a real problem last year. I'm not convinced it's that improved. In fact, I'm on record of the 82% completion percentage that Cade McNamara had last week was absolutely fool's gold. If you go back and watch the catch radius of 6 of the completions were nowhere near the core of the receiver. The receivers had to make great catches just to secure the completion. So there are a lot of fool's gold, I think, still in the Iowa passing game. What's not fool's gold is the running game. This is bona fide success on the ground with a 6'1", 237-pound running back who is, harkens back to, the Lawrence Maroney type back in the backfield for Iowa. And I think when you look at Tim Lester's running attack, it's actually very similar to the early 2000s Gophers running attack, where you have tight ends trading.
Sure.
You have small motions that force a defense to commit to their alignment and allows the offensive line to make adjustments and get to the best angles. I'm really impressed with the Tim Lester running game. I think he came in, ballyhooed as a quarterback's coach and passing coordinator. I've been really impressed with how he's designed a running game. And the Iowa offensive line, anchored really by right guard number 70, Bo Stevens, he's really coming on, and that's been one of the real reasons for the success of this Iowa running game is their interior offensive line, and Connor Colby, Logan Jones, and Bo Stevens are really sealing the interior so the exterior can create some running lanes.
Yeah, that's great. You kind of touched on it already. You mentioned you're not sold on the quarterback. I was going to ask you about Cade McNamara. I didn't get to watch. I watched the replay before we did this, but live, I checked my phone at the Gopher game halftime, and I saw a lot of Iowa fans upset. Obviously, it was a tight score with Troy, down on the quarterback play, and you mentioned it. I looked at the stats, and they were better than I thought. And then I also went back and I saw that goal line situation. They brought in the backup Sullivan. Is there a chance that he plays more in this game outside of that, or do you think that's just going to be a goal line package and it's Cade's show until something else happens?
I think we're going to see Sullivan more, Tori. I don't know about you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think they're going to probably use him a little bit in some Wildcat type situations. I mean, it's not Wildcat but more of a running option RPO kind of thing like that once in a while. Going back to Cade a little bit, I mean, he's on his third offensive coordinator in 3 years, coming off 2 major injuries. He's only played 3 actual games healthy, like fully healthy. So, I think there was some rust, and I think that they purposely throttled him down last weekend to do less deep throws, less mid throws, and more just easy pitch and catch things to build his confidence and get him moving. He has a bad propensity still to kind of throw off his back foot. He gets nervous, I think, a little bit about his leg. I think he's still working his way back in, and he's still learning the offense. So, but yeah, I think everybody's still learning the offense, and I think they have something in Sullivan that they don't typically have. And if nothing else, Iowa trying to throw a wrench at you and change things up is almost insane to say under Kirk Ferentz.
And I think the thing we're going to see with Sullivan, Tori is far more kind about Cade McNamara than I am. I went back and watched his Michigan tape towards the end, and the throwing off the back foot is his panic mechanism, and I don't know what it is. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I think what Sullivan is Sullivan's a much closer thing to a Drew Tate than we've had in the past, where he's a guy who can move off platform. And it's not like when you bring in the second quarterback, like we've seen Michigan bring Orgy in, we've seen some other quarterbacks come in other systems where they're there to run the read option, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to keep it on their first snap. That's not what Sullivan is. Sullivan's a guy who can come in and actually orchestrate your full playbook. But he offers more mobility and more of a threat. And I think what we're going to see is, if it's effective in the red zone, I think you're going to start to see. I think we're going to see him as the starting quarterback by the end of October, whether it's due to injury or performance.
Bold prediction, Joel. I might put money against that. Kirk Ferentz hates a quarterback controversy like normal people hate, 30 below weather.
This is great because I felt like from the Iowa fans I followed, they were both split, and I got live representation of that on the show. So this is great.
But I want to say that my negativity towards Cade is due to countless hours of neglecting my family and watching videos that I shouldn't be watching. Like it's become an obsession, and there is a mechanical defect that I can't quite put my hand on. It's not like Deacon Hill holding the ball at his pecker every day. Like it's something else. There's something else with his throwing motion that I don't.
It looks wonky. It looks like he's pitching rather than throwing a football.
I mean, it's like it's
a weird, almost sidearm kind of.
You know who I compare him to? I compare him a lot to Russell Wilson. Like I think that he's just less annoying. And I think really
mobile.
Well, I think the reason that he is still the starting quarterback at Iowa is because he's been voted captain by his teammates. I think he has won the locker room, and so he might be our Maximus here as we enter the Coliseum, because he's won the hoi polloi that is the locker room. But I think at some point you got to go over the better performing athlete, and I'd like to see if Sullivan can win the trust of the coaching staff.
Yeah.
Next,
that's obviously important in that college locker room. But yeah, like you said, if the wins aren't coming, that's gonna fall away quickly. But
I think the wins are going to come. That's the thing, is I think that this team's complete enough that they're going to keep winning. But are we going good to good, or are we going to try to get good to great? And I don't know if that's the catalyst, that we can, our Levantis moment, if you will. Kafka Metamorphosis. Any Kafka Metamorphosis fans out there for anybody?
I'm buying what you're picking down. To mix a metaphor.
Yeah. I guess as far as the guys that that Cade's gonna be throwing to, does Iowa have another stud tight end that we need to look out for? Or is there a wide receiver that you guys think can be that big play target off of the play action?
That's an awesome question, actually, because Luke Lachey has had a ton of hype for 2 seasons, and he started off really good last year and then got injured, and frankly been a bit of a no-show so far this season early. I mean, blocking, he's doing well. They've really spread it around. They've already thrown to 10 different tight ends and receivers. Is that right, Joel? The number I think was 10. And last year, the entire season, they threw to 8 different ends and receivers. So there's nobody that I would call an emerging star, but there are a handful of fairly capable guys. The Northwestern transfer, Gill, has been the leader so far. Caleb Brown is a transfer from Ohio State that has a lot of intrigue and interest, but he's been in the doghouse, so we haven't seen much of him. And then they got this, the prototypical small-town white Iowa wide receiver out of the nowhere, Vanderzee, and as a true freshman, he's already made some big catches. So
he's from a town that's put more players in the NFL than Pleasant Valley, where your kids went to high school. So
what's the population, Joel?
Like 800.
Okay.
But they put players in
Small
the
town.
NFL. That's all I'm
Okay,
saying.
it's a small town in Iowa.
This is what I do: is I just argue with Tori. Um,
Wrongly.
but yeah, and Dayton Howard is playing a little bit more. He played, I think, about 12 snaps on Saturday. He's a young, big framed wide receiver. But yeah, Gill has been the real surprise, and I think we all knew he was good. He was a solid player at Northwestern. He transferred with Brendan Sullivan from Northwestern. He's a senior, and he has been a real spark plug in the passing game. Now, Lachey is a big factor in this, in that he is receiving a lot of bracket coverage. We're seeing a lot of best linebacker, keep a safety over the top. We're not going to let the 6'5" tight end beat us, and that type of alignment has actually created some advantageous running lanes for the running game. So that's one of those hidden blessings of having a really good tight end, is that you're able to kind of force them to commit to taking him away, and it creates some opportunities for other people. So Caden Weechin too is our punt returner and kick returner. He had a 31-yard catch that was really, really a spark plug moment on Saturday. And he's a burner. He's a really fast kid. Another walk-on from Williamsburg, Iowa. But he's got the ability, I think, to give defense fits. But I think he's got some injury-prone tendencies, so they don't.
And
play
he's
him on
reckless.
offense.
He
Yeah,
is reckless.
he
He
is
hates to fair catch. He put one on the field last week
Yeah.
that they were fortunate to get back. I mean, he's either going to fumble or get you like 40-yard punt return. So it's
He's Tweeter is what he is. He's Tweeter from Varsity Blues. That's how he's been described to me, without the criminal behavior. But it'll be fun. There are some kids, I think, who are waiting to emerge, and I think the Tim Lester offense is a far more fertile environment for emergence than the previous offensive system was.
Brian Ferentz
Iowa
basically
seems to.
soiled the whole, like just salted all the fields of death of offense.
I was just gonna say Iowa seems to always find their tight ends against us. Maybe last year's side, although it was really windy last year, so maybe we should cut those offenses a little bit of a break. Although they were both terrible, but yeah,
Addison
I
Estrenga
expect.
is really good too. Addison
From
Estrenga
Sun
is a
Prairie,
really
Wisconsin,
good
by
tight
the way. So
Yeah.
he might have a little extra mojo in the game. He's from a
Kid who was
Madison suburb.
he was initially committed to play baseball at Iowa, and then he went to a football camp and got a football offer and came as a tight end. And then Zach Ortworth, who I think is from a small town somewhere too, he's another third tight end. So I mean, we're still seeing a lot of 3 tight end formations for Iowa.
Sure.
I mean, they're very, very similar to the Glenn Mason. The Tim Lester and Glenn Mason systems are very similar.
Okay. Yeah, and my final offensive question was just Caleb Johnson is fantastic, averaging almost 8 yards a carry. Feel free to gush about him more, but what's it look like behind him, or is it just gonna be like he's on the field the whole time type of
I'll
thing?
go first with this. I think this is the deepest running back room that Iowa has had. And they're all kind of a little bit different. Caleb Johnson's really big. LeSean Williams is hurt. He got hurt again on Saturday. He was the projected starter coming into the season. And he's battling an ankle, so he's not going to play Saturday. But Kamari Moulton, a redshirt freshman, has played a lot this year. He actually was the starter week 1. Caleb Johnson was actually suspended for the first half of the first game, and it wasn't a coach's suspension. It was a Iowa leadership group, so the players voted for a suspension, and he's clearly not in the doghouse any longer.
Right.
But so Kamari Moulton, and he's a little bit more of like a James White back, or if you remember him for Wisconsin a few years ago, played for the Patriots as well. He can get in between the tackles, but also has some real skills in the passing game. And then there's a sophomore, Jazz Patterson, who's healthy again, who got some carries late in the Troy game. And Jazz is a home run waiting to happen, and he can go at a moment's notice. He's from South Florida. He was a Liddell Betts, the running backs coach, pulled him out of Florida when he came on board, and he's got some get up and go to him. So there is a real depth at that position for Iowa this year.
I'll say one thing that's been really excited about the running game for Iowa this year, unlike last year, is you're very, very unlikely to see a no gain or a tackle for loss. All of these guys, and they even talked about how they've changed the zone run a little bit, where they're not doing as much lateral motion; they're doing a little more angular motion. So they're getting push and a little bit of yardage almost every time. And with Iowa, the whole key is if you get Iowa behind the chains, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 8 or longer, you basically have them dead in the water. They're doing a much better job this year because of this running game at not getting into those situations, and it's making a big difference. So, yeah, LaShawn can take it at any time. Moulton is always going to get a few yards, and then Jazz Patterson also has that ability to just kind of come out of nowhere. So, yeah, it's a pretty scary situation to try to stop that run game right now.
I mean, Caleb Johnson's leading the nation in rushing, and I know that the Boise
Yeah.
State guy had a bye week last week, and he'll probably surpass him just based off of their schedule and whatnot. But he seems to be running for like a 20 or 30-yard gain every 3 or 4 carries.
And your original
Yeah.
question, Kurt, sorry to interrupt, Joel, that made me think of that, is that I feel like they didn't give Caleb Johnson the ball enough, particularly in the red zone and particularly against Iowa State. Like, they probably, if they'd have just handed him the ball twice in the first half, Iowa wins that game by 10. So weirdly, that Moulton has been getting even more carries, and at least initially until last week. So
Yeah, PJ gushed about him in his presser, and
Elite.
Yeah.
He's elite.
he's an elite running back for sure. You guys got a good one, and it sounds like a good room behind him.
Yeah,
who's
it-
the
it
best
really-
offensive player? Who's the best offensive player on the Gophers this year? Like the playmaker. Who should Iowa be scared of?
That's Darius Taylor. He just another dynamic running back that we got. A little bit different. Where like he's physical, but it's tough to describe. It's not like he's just running through 5 guys at a time. It's just like he just seems to be elusive, I guess, and squeak by people. I mean, he's definitely strong, no doubt. And it's just kind of once he finds space, he's got a burst to him, but his top end speed isn't like he's not a home run threat per se. I'm saying that after he just ran for 81 yards against Nevada, but that's not usually his style. It's more of 5, 6, then break like a 15, 20-yard run on teams. That's his usual style. We haven't been as successful running the ball this year, but we've been throwing the ball more often as well, and he's been a great option. It's kind of just a check down to him, but then he's making one guy miss and turning up and getting into the secondary. So it's been effective, basically an extension of the run game, just getting him the football.
It's where it's been so big for Iowa is to have veteran leadership at the linebacker position of Nick Jackson and Jay Higgins, because they are able to stop the interior run without any additional safety resources. So
Yep.
I really look forward to that matchup of this. I know Jackson had 100 yards or plus against Iowa last year, but I think it's one of those things where
Dave doesn't stop, does he? He just keeps coming
he's
in.
relentless. He's relentless. And I think the best part about what Iowa's defense does is that's why this game's always so fun, because I feel like the two teams they don't shy away from each other's strengths, because the strength of Iowa's offense is running the ball. Well, Minnesota usually has a pretty good front seven. The strength of Minnesota, going all the way back to the Glenn Mason days with the Lawrence Maronis and all of that stable of running backs, they still have that. Mo Ibrahim, the most snake-bitten running back of the last 5 years from an injury standpoint. And I got to be honest, I was always very thankful that it seemed that one of his injuries happened, around the Iowa game, and we didn't have to see him in that backfield, because that guy was special. And I think that's going to be fun to watch on Saturday, is how they handle the running back.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Iowa's defense is always going to be good. It feels like they've always been good. But this year in particular, what do you guys think is the biggest weakness to this defense? Or what are you most concerned about, maybe specifically about this matchup?
I'll let you take that first, Joel. You're more of the coaching mind.
Corner. specifically the corner opposite Jamari Harris. Jamari Harris is a veteran. He's played really well. He's played a lot of good football out of Chicago. TJ Hall had a rough day on Saturday. Again, that game was a lot closer than it on the scoreboard than it really felt like when you're watching it in the stadium. And Tori wrote a great column about that this weekend or today on Tuesdays with Torby at HawkeyeReport.com. But the corner position, it's not that they're bad; it's just that there's some inexperience, and so how do they adjust? One of the touchdowns that looked like it was the corner's fault. Troy ran a really good cover 2 beater, and they ran a vertical on the outside, and then they ran a post for the number 2 receiver. Safety carried with the number 2 on the post. Inexperienced corner peeked to the flat instead of carrying vertical with the vertical route, and he just got beat by Ross, and it was a big, long touchdown. So corner is susceptible. The fastest way to shore that up is Iowa's got to get some more pass rush with their front 4. And they've done a nice job with that. They have some real talent up front, and they actually have some depth up front too. So I think the one thing that I have learned from being an Iowa fan, and one thing I've just learned about being in a coach's room and being in the locker rooms, is that the fastest way to shore up your pass defense is to make your quarterback really uncomfortable. And I think that's the way Iowa's going to try to do that. Is they got a couple guys who can turn the corner. And Minnesota fans, watch number 95 on the defensive line, Aaron Graves. In my opinion, he's a top 3 round draft pick. He's big. He's fast. He made national news as a high school as being the first guy in Iowa to play in a playoff basketball game and wrestle in the state wrestling tournament in the same day.
Wow.
So he's a freak athlete, and he's kind of Carl Klug like, but he's also got a lot of comparisons to Nebraska great Ndamukong Suh from a physical tool standpoint. So if Iowa can rush the passer, the secondary will have no issues.
I'm not going to repeat what Joel said about the corners. It definitely is the concern, and yeah, Cooper DeJean is not back there anymore either, and he was a shutdown. So you've got that situation. As always, under Phil Parker, they have a lot of good people, but they're still learning. But to your point, what I'm really curious to see, Joel, is they have not dialed up any pressure this year. I mean, that I was actually pretty irritated by the lack of it at the second half against Iowa State. They just let the quarterback sit back there and pick them apart too often.
Are you talking about blitzing?
A little bit. I don't feel like they've done it as much or as effectively as you might expect. So I'll be curious to see if they do a little bit more of that with Minnesota.
Minnesota's offensive attack lends itself to more blitzing than Iowa State. With Iowa State and their more spread offense and getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands in 3 steps, blitzing's really dangerous. So I can see why they didn't blitz as much against Iowa State. So we'll see if they dial up some pressure. Nick Jackson's a pretty good blitzer too. So we'll see if they get it from the linebacker position so that we can keep the back 4 intact.
Yeah. So I just wanted your guys' opinion on this. The last 2 games, Minnesota, like I've mentioned it a couple times to you guys now, we've been passing to run the ball. Very different approach than what we've seen out of PJ's offenses in the past. I'm having a tough time picturing what that even looks like against Iowa because it's been so conservative against you guys in the past. And your defense is great. Is Iowa, if that is the approach, does Iowa just sit tight in coverage and make Minnesota try and beat them deep? I know you mentioned the corners had some struggles and they've given up some, but if I'm Iowa, I'm picturing myself just sitting tight on that underneath stuff, quick outs, which is kind of what the Gophers passing game has been, especially on early downs. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think the reason teams get a little bit of cold feet about trying to pass to beat Iowa is that if you get behind the chains too fast, if you don't make something on first down, if you have an incomplete pass and then they get to pin their ears back and come at, I mean, you can go from 2nd and 10 to 3rd and 14 to getting a pick 6 or a sack and then a shitty or crummy punt right away. and the next thing you know, you're in deep trouble. So it makes sense that teams want to tread a little carefully when they're playing that kind of a defense, because Iowa wants to give up nothing. And so the key, and I think what Troy actually did well, is they did run, dink, run, dink, run, dink, run, dink. Oh my gosh, bomb. Like, I think that's how you get to Iowa. You have to, like, just, kind of lull them into a pattern, and then bam, unleash something. And if you got a guy that can take the top off, that's how I'd do it. How about you, Joel?
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a Rashad Bateman, sitting on the sideline in Minnesota this year like there has been in the past, where they've had some elite receivers, elite in PJ Flex terms. I think that the thing that makes that approach so dangerous is that Iowa's comfortable being patient with you, and I think that's when you talk to former Iowa players, especially some of the defensive backs. When they talk about what it's like to play for Phil Parker, because it's a unique situation where the defensive backs coach is also the defensive coordinator, where a lot of coaches will build their defense from the front back. Iowa kind of builds their defense from the back forward, and when it comes to some of the cerebral parts. So there's a lot of discipline. There's a lot of patience in that zone coverage that they play, and they'll let you get 6 yards. They'll let you get 7 yards. But then when that field compresses, now all of a sudden that 7 yards becomes 3. And all of a sudden now you're throwing it into a tight window. Oh, and here comes an NFL linebacker, Jay Higgins, underneath to pick it and take the ball away. So I think that's where Iowa can be so frustrating for quarterbacks. And I know your guy has come from New Hampshire, which is a powerhouse FCS program, has great history. Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, all of those guys. So he's seen some good competition, but I'm not sure he's seen a defense that's this patient, that's this willing to let you make a mistake and force you into making a mistake. And I think that's where quarterbacks panic, is when they see all the eyeballs staring right at them when they're dropping back the pass, and here comes, and that's where mistakes happen.
And to build on that, to Joel's point, is the way Iowa State was able to pull the upset on Iowa was by they only turned the ball over once, and not at super critical time. And Iowa did turn it over twice. Now, granted, one was at the last pass Hail Mary, so it was more of a wash. But yeah, if you can keep the turnover battle even, that's how you have your best shot to take down Iowa.
I'm just going to let you know, Gopher fans are going to be excited by that to an extent, just because Brosmer is supposed to be his trait, is the cerebral guy, right? Knowing where the football should go. Obviously, it's different when there's an elite defense coming at you every play. So it's going to be, I'm
fun matchup.
Super fascinated to see how that plays out.
And the bigger factor is it's the second guy coming in on a tackle is going to try to take that ball away. There's very few teams that are as disciplined at trying to take the ball away as Iowa is. The other coaches who do it, Nick Saban did it at Alabama. Nick Saban was Phil Parker's position coach at Michigan State. So, I mean, there's a lot of DNA that goes back decades of how to play this game the right way. And it's Iowa just doesn't beat themselves very often. They did against Iowa State. They had busted coverage that turned into a game-winning field goal opportunity. So they've had 2 games in a row where they've had some busted coverage. How can Iowa fix that? I would imagine that's been a big focus this week in the defensive meeting room.
And I think actually that could play into Minnesota's favor, because I feel like Iowa's going to be particularly concerned about getting beat deep. So I think if your quarterback's patient, and the way Iowa's been beaten by teams in the past is by the dink and dunk offense. If you're patient and willing, it's funny because I just said the way to beat Iowa is to throw it deep, right? Well, now I'm like 2 steps ahead. It's like a chess game.
Mix.
Yeah, but it's like a chess game. Is that now Iowa's going to be concerned about that? So is the short and intermediate pass game going to be more open than it typically would? That's what I'd be curious about.
I have a question for you guys, and I should have asked it when you were on our show. What's the mental makeup of this Minnesota team? Because that's a big factor. Morgan had been there forever. and always was supposed to be a pretty strong, mentally tough guy, but he seemed to turn the ball over a lot against the Hawkeyes. I think that's my question is, PJ obviously is an emotional guy. He builds his team around slogans and emotion, but he also builds his team around running the football and things like that too. What's the mental makeup? Do you feel like there's a lot of mental toughness on this team, or has it not really been tested yet?
Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really been tested too much with this group. I mean, I guess we saw a little bit at the end of the North Carolina game when they got in the 2-minute offense. The offense had struggled, but then when we got in that 2-minute situation in the clutch, we were able to move the ball and had a little bit of a weird clock situation at the end there. And obviously, the missed field goal we ended up losing. But I feel like it's definitely seemed like when the offense has struggled, it doesn't deter anyone. Like the offense keeps, will end up figuring it out and starts clicking by the end of the game. Now we just haven't seen it against a defense like Iowa. And then on the flip side, defensively, I think our defensive front and our linebackers are so experienced that it seems like that's a pretty cohesive group and they are pretty disciplined. The big worry is the defensive backfield. There's a lot of young guys and there's a lot of guys rotating in, and I think that's the concern there is that those guys could get caught making a mistake, especially if there's guys coming in and off the field too.
It's kind of a weakness against weakness position there, though, because Iowa's wide receiver room is okay.
I will say, though, the safeties have played extremely well. I think you could. Yeah. I mean, the front four the starting front four has been good, but I think you could make an argument that the safeties have been what was going to look like the biggest question mark on the team this year. Not the greatest competition. North Carolina lost their quarterback halfway through the game, but
that was a different game when Johnson went out.
Yeah, but they've been really good, the young safeties. So and maybe even, dare I say, a strength. They forced a lot of turnovers. We forced 9 turnovers on the year so far. So they've been successful at that. I would say Brosmer's probably got more trust out of any quarterback PJ's had, even than probably Tanner. He hasn't really gotten flustered. He's taken some sacks where he's tried to escape, and I think that's been him trying to adjust to the speed of stepping up a level, where the play's dead, just go down. He's tried to spin out, and he's lost like an extra 8 yards on a sack. So that's where he's been the most rattled. He hasn't really thrown it up for grabs. He had a tough fumble. He was diving down, and North Carolina came in and punched it out. That was a critical turnover in the North Carolina game, but he bounced back, like Max said, in the 2-minute warning. And then he did throw a pick last game. Our receiver just stopped running his route, and so their D-back just went over and caught the ball in the end zone. That was kind of an odd play, but he hasn't just thrown it up for grabs, really. So he's been pretty good. But, yeah, Iowa, with the rivalry, there's just different emotions involved, and, I mean, that's affected PJ in the years past. I'm sure you guys remember him running out on the field, getting us a penalty late in 2019 for
lost you the game. He cost that.
Whatever reason.
You guys win. You win that game if he doesn't do that.
I don't know about
so
that.
It's always some unexpectedness when emotions of rivalry game get in there. Max, did you have any other? I do have a special teams question, but I didn't know if Max had another.
I probably have the same special teams question that you do, so go ahead.
Okay.
Love special
Corey
teams
Taylor's
questions.
gone. I want to know what it looks like now. I haven't seen. Iowa's not punting as much, so good job.
It hasn't looked. It hasn't looked great. And I think there was some irrational exuberance. Like Iowa was like, oh, another Australian kid with a huge leg. He just pencil him in, and it looks the same. It doesn't look the same. Now he's had a couple nice ones. One was returned for a touchdown last week that was a combination of a I won't even call it bad. It was a mediocre kind of line drive.
It was a bad kick, Tori. It was a bad kick.
It was, but it shouldn't have been a touchdown if you actually, as Kurt said in his press conference today, didn't cover it like a junior high team.
Yeah, that was the quote from the press. The quote from the press conference today is our punt coverage on that touchdown looked like a junior high team,
which it did.
Nice.
So it was it's not the usual airtight unit that you expect to see out of Iowa. Field goal kicking, on the other hand, looks amazing. Like Drew Stevens is knocking in 45-yarders that would be good from 60. Like it's that I'm very excited about.
I think allegedly.
Briefly mentioned Caden Waitgen, the returner, who's simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. So yeah, it's a mixed bag back there.
Yeah, Okay.
Iowa has the technology. Most of the schools have this technology where it's kind of like the baseball batting cage, like exit velocity tracking system, where they can kind of predict distance. And apparently, Drew Stevens has hit over 70 to 72 yards on a couple of kicks
Wow.
this year with that. So he's a big leg out of North Augusta, South Carolina. And he's got, so it'll be interesting to see. I mean,
Yeah.
what he can do if he's given the opportunity. But then you have the whole risk reward of, is it worth trying the long field goal? The
Sure.
punting, I'll address the punting. So Tori mentioned I have a coaching background. My first real paid gig was I was a special teams coordinator at a good high school here in Iowa, and so I've coached kickers, I've coached punters, I've done a lot of that stuff, and he's averaging I think 37.8 yards a kick right now, and that's with a 77-yard return for touchdown on one, so that hurts the average a
Yeah.
little bit, but his hang time is erratic a little bit, so I think he's still kind of learning how to kick directionally. He's got a big leg, though. Reese Dakin is his name, and he does have a big leg. I saw him kick a knuckle punt at the kids' scrimmage in warm-ups, and I've seen him bust out the knuckle punt a couple times, which I don't know how he does it. I know that some of these Australian guys can do it. These are old rugby Australian rules stuff that they do. So
Yeah.
I would love for him to have a breakout game. It's weird, though. It's kind of like, whomever follows Caleb Williams as the quarterback at USC, Miller Moss is dealing with this Heisman Trophy hype, to follow in their footsteps. That's what Tory Taylor created at the University of Iowa.
No, it was incredible to see him flip the field literally from what felt like anywhere. Yeah, terrific punter. I mean,
Total weapon. 4 years of an absolute unit at the punter position. And Iowa used it to the best of their advantage. And they built a system to truly use it as a weapon. And Dakin will get to, I think, a similar standard. I think it's just going to take him a minute to get there because
he's not there yet, though. So it should be interesting to see.
But he's not a liability. But he's not a liability.
He's like an average college punter, which
and it's really
is not acceptable at the University of Iowa.
Well, and it's so
I'm just
interesting.
happy it's a little bit level playing field this year. That's all.
Kurt and Max, what's really interesting about this whole discussion is the freshman who's redshirting at the University of Georgia right now, the number one high school punter in the country, is from Mediapolis, Iowa, about 50 miles southwest or southeast of Iowa City. And so Iowa really is all in on Dakin because they had access and an inner road to the number one U.S.-born punter in the country because he was in our state. But they elected to stick with their Australian program, and I don't think it's a bad decision. But it's one of those things where it's like, whew.
Well, and from a Iowa parochial, I mean, this is a small town, rural state. There's some sour grapes about that whole situation.
I'm going to say that can cause some bitterness from hometown fans. Yeah. I know it does here when we don't go after a guy in particular.
Well, especially when he goes to the defending national champion. It's one thing if he goes to South Dakota, okay, fine.
Right.
But he's oh, Iowa didn't offer, so he had to settle for Georgia.
True.
Let that sink in.
Yeah, guys, you have been fantastic. Let's hear it. Let's get your score predictions for this matchup. 6:30 NBC under the lights.
Who's the broadcast crew? Who is? It's not.
I have no idea who does it for them now. I don't know. I was gonna say they are projecting some potential rain. It's kind of far out, so who actually knows what it's gonna be? But anyway.
Yeah,
what are your thoughts on how this one goes down?
I'll say, I think you mentioned it on our show, Kurt, is that Iowa tends to be rounding into form of what they're going to be, and I think this year's going to be a pretty good team in November. Still kind of an unbaked cake in September, so that gives me great pause for this game because Minnesota is always going to give Iowa a tough game. The fact that it's at night makes me a little nervous. I do think Iowa has a little bit of the intangible edge from the quote-unquote revenge factor from the bad taste in their mouth from last year. And I think Iowa's just stronger enough than Minnesota in the trenches that if they can not turn the ball over themselves and force one or two from Minnesota, I think they win a squeaker somewhere around the 16-13 line, and it's going to be a white knuckler as usual.
37-13 Hawks.
He's staying with it. I like that you didn't change it just because you're the guest on the show. I appreciate that.
I mean, and honestly, the problem is that, if Iowa's defense shores itself up, it is capable of holding a team to 10 points or less. And then if you start
absolutely.
turning it over, doing something silly, it can spiral on you. Like, Iowa's not going to come out and run the ball down their throat or throw the ball all over and just, dominate somebody. That's not how they win, not even when they do get those bigger scores. But last week was another good example. Like, that game kind of felt like a 7-3 kind of game for most of it. And then you're walking out of the stadium, you're like, holy crap, they won by, like, what was the final score? 38-10, something like that. Like, I can't even remember the exact number last week, but it was like a thorough demolishing, but it never felt like it. So that can happen. So I don't know why I felt I had to defend Joel's pick, but
no, you don't at all. I think it's a coin flip. I'm sticking with the Gophers. 19-17. Turnover battle, obviously going to be huge. And Gophers' offensive line got to hold up. And because I like I said on your guys' pod, I like the Gophers' defensive front, the starters. But if they get tired, then I'm scared Caleb Johnson's going to do Caleb Johnson things and break a big one. So, I'm going to go Gophers 19-17. I think it's a coin flip game.
Yeah, I think same thing. Low scoring and close. I've got the Gophers 18-15. And yeah, like I said, I hope Rosemary doesn't come out looking too nervous. Hopefully Darius Taylor in the run game can help that out a little bit. Give him some opportunities to take those shots against those corners. And yeah, it's going to be definitely a field position game like always. So.
And just so fans don't think I forget, we've had some untimely drops this year on deep shots as well. Those got to be caught when they're there against Iowa, because it's not very often that you get them. So got to catch them if they're there. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't you go ahead and tell our viewers where they can find you if they want to tune in for their favorite Iowa content.
Tori always points to me because I'm the plug guy. So we're at 12 Saturdays 2.0 podcast. We're 2.0 because Tori had a previous relationship that had a podcast the 12 Saturdays. I'm his second wife when it comes to podcast partners. So this is the 2.0. The 2.0 iteration. You could also search it as 12 Saturdays Iowa football and beyond, because we try to do a little bit more than just football. We try to talk all things Hawkeye. My favorite movie is Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory because Gene Wilder is a Hawkeye. And so
you just ruined them for me.
Yep, there you go. There you go. No, so you can find us. We're on all of the platforms: Spotify, Apple Music, all of those things.
And on X at 12Saturdays.
Yes. And Tori handles the Twitter account, so I kind of distance myself.
And I will warn you, I sometimes put political content on there because it's kind of my burner account. So
well, there you go.
Or be offended. I don't care.
Yeah. So but we're happy to have you as Gopher fans absorb a lot of our content, because we do actually try to be somewhat level-headed and somewhat cerebral. Our goal with our podcast is to be the rational fan, where we try to actually use reason and logic to defend our fanatic positions. So, and Tori undersells himself. Go to HawkeyeReport.com every Tuesday for his Tuesdays with Torby column. I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it yet, but I'm going to have to lay into him because he was one of the boo birds in the stands on Saturday.
Come on, you're only up 14-10. You have a minute left and 2 timeouts, and you're just going to kneel out the half? That's just cowardice.
Cowardice that can win games because they were getting the ball coming out of half. So that's I'm the guy in the stands who's yelling at the people around me, and I'm not afraid.
I'd be one of the people. It's a good thing Joel and I sit nowhere near each other, because he'd probably have to physically restrain me.
So we'd be yelling at each other. So it's all good.
Guys, this was awesome.
Thanks
Again,
for
really
having us.
appreciate your insight. You guys know your stuff, and really liked having you on. So thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Well, come on down to
Let's
Iowa
get out of
City
here.
next year. Happy to host you.
Row the boat.
Absolutely. Every
Let
time I
me
do go to
down the
Iowa,
stream.
you guys have sports betting there, and unfortunately, Minnesota is still lacking in that area.
Hey,
So
you guys have Juicy Lucy's, so there you go.
that's not
Which
even a
again,
thing anywhere in Iowa. I thought those
so
Well,
much
spread
better
to
than
all
Runza.
Midwest.
it's
Yeah.
so much better than Runza's. That's
Yeah,
true.
no, we have Made Right down here, which is basically an unfinished sloppy Joe. But
Hey,
whatever.
F you, Made Right started in my hometown, dude.
I know it.
Like,
They're mid at best, to use the words the kids all say. So.
Oh man, guys, thank you. This was awesome.
All right, have a good one.
all right, see you
All
guys.
right,
See you guys.
Again, that was the 12 Saturdays joining us. Really liked having them on. Really appreciated their insight. They know their stuff. Max, I think we covered pretty much everything we were going to say about that game. Any other notes you wanted to add? I think we pretty much got it. Again, guys, if you're looking for our Gopher take on the game from an Iowa perspective, we did go on their pod, so that'll be posted by them. Honestly, it was kind of a lot of the same conversation of what we had here. Again, I really like our defensive front. We did a really good job against this running back tandem. That is good. I believe in that they're good, but we did well against it last year. I just don't know if the depth of that D line for us will hold up this year if they're forced to be on the field all the time. And I think that's a real possibility if Iowa's D-line dominates our O-line and gets a lot of 3-and-outs or short field. So that would be my biggest concern as a Gopher fan. Sure, we'll touch on it. Dave asked, do you guys think it was the right call made last year? The only thing that I would be pissed off from an Iowa fan is because they should have been on the field. Yeah, and that's really all they have to be mad about is that it wasn't called right away on the field. But here's the thing, though. The thing that, yes, it was the right call. It had been reviewed and called back before. That's not a thing. It happened last season as well. The Gophers got called for that earlier in the season. So every Iowa person that tuned into this is already over me. And the missed call on the play was Iowa. You cannot jump and land on people in the tackle box, and that's what happened. And that's what the Big Ten's after review saying that call was correct. The invalid fair catch signal was correct, and that they missed the personal foul on Iowa. You can't land even on the wedge players that are in the tackle box on punt, and that's exactly what happened. So that whole thing would have been first down Minnesota, completely different ending to the game. I mean, but hey, it has made it enjoyable. And I really wasn't going to touch on it because I feel like Iowa has brought it up so much themselves that you don't even really have to remind them how it ended. So that's how I feel about that. Max, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just pouring salt in the wound, and I'd get it. I'm sure if we were on the other side, we'd probably feel pretty negatively towards it.
For sure.
I think what I would feel more negatively towards, that I feel like a lot of the Iowa fans don't point out, is that they had the ball and they had an opportunity to still go down and win the game. They couldn't make it happen. I think they had 2 yards
and
of offense
from really
the entire
good field
second
position.
half. So
yeah.
So
absolutely.
In that one moment, frustrating, but like you said, it's
and you
technically the right call.
I do feel for Coup that they didn't call it right away, right? That's
That's such a huge moment.
They missed multiple things on that play. So
yeah, I guess the only little thing I'd add about the game is like they kind of talked about, if their weakness or their concern on the defense is the cornerbacks, it kind of comes back to what we've talked about in PJ Fleck, and it doesn't have to be reckless and it doesn't have to be overly aggressive, but when you have an opportunity, you have to take it, whether it's in the red zone or if it's a second and short from midfield. We've got to try to score points. I mean, these points are going to come at a premium. This is the time that PJ would be right, that first to 20 wins, because that's how this game's going to go. I'd say first to 15 is going to win, but I hope we try. The goal is not to get just 20, though, and I think that's the frustrating part. But we'll see.
That's been maybe a theme of frustration fans have had, is we're kind of content when the game's tied or up by a score. There doesn't always seem to be not that they're not trying to score, but it just seems like they get more lackadaisical with it. There's not the same urgency as far as pushing the ball down the field.
To put them
away. great way to say it. Which would love to see more of that this game, obviously. We are over the hour mark, but we are going to do the Sky U Pod Parlay of the Week, which has not hit at all. And if we're being completely honest, Spencer, if you listened, he can't join us tonight, fellas. Listeners, he is becoming a doctor, on his way to becoming a doctor. He's in medical school. He's got a son, young son. Give him some slack for not being able to make it every time this year. I don't love his pick. I really don't love his pick for the lock of the week. He's going Sparty plus 6.5 at Boston College. But you know what? He was right last week and I was wrong. So got to accept it for what it is. That's the first pick. Max, go ahead. What is your lock of the week for this Sky Pot Parlay of the Week?
Yeah, my lock of the week this week, we're going with the Friday night game. Illinois, we're taking the 7.5 points in Lincoln. They opened as 9.5 point dogs. I'm really sad that already dropped 2 points, but I think this game Illinois can win. And if you're giving me over a touchdown, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, that's a great game. I love that as well. 9.5, especially my mind was blown because I thought it was at Illinois. I'm like, what in the world? So yeah, I was about to jump all over that, make a drive down to Iowa. But no, I love that one, which probably means it's not going to hit if we both love it. Here's one I really do like a lot. Is Rutgers plus 3.5 at Virginia Tech. I know Virginia Tech was picked by some to be a sleeper team in the ACC. Did I say that right? Yeah, ACC. Yeah. And then they lost the game to Vandy, so I'm not just over them, but they haven't stopped the run against any of their teams this year, or their opponents, I should say. And Rutgers' bread and butter is running the football. I love Rutgers to win it outright, and they're getting over a field goal. I think that's enough margin to make it my lock of the week. So I'm locking in Rutgers plus 3.5 at Virginia Tech. Tough environment. I think it's an afternoon game though, which might help a little bit. So yeah, there you have it. All Big Ten games in the parlay. I don't know what that means. That doesn't happen all that often. But maybe that's the recipe for success for this thing.
We shall see.
Yeah. All right. Max, go ahead. We do have some other games that we are picking this week. Go ahead and lead us through that.
Yeah, let me get to the first one here. So we will go with the first one in the list is in Ann Arbor. USC is a 6-point favorite at Michigan.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That line has really moved. I think it started at 3, I believe, for USC, which was a lot more interesting. I think Michigan covers that spread just because of how LSU was able to run on USC. I still think Michigan can run the ball. They seem to get back to that last week. It's just, can Alex Orji throw it enough to make USC have to respect it? Just enough to not overload the box each time. And I still think Michigan's got a good defense. So ultimately, I do like USC to win in a close one, but I like Michigan to cover that spread.
Yeah, same for me. I think USC can win, but I think, it'll be a good test to see what USC's defense is really like against that Michigan run game. And I feel like the line probably moved with the news that Orji's starting, but in my mind, I feel like that's an improvement for Michigan from what we've seen.
I agree.
We'll see. We could be
everyone right
wrong.
now is just taking notes of fading us.
Yeah,
so like, okay, USC, Nebraska. Yeah,
it's not a bad strategy. All right. Next, the 3:00 slate in Stillwater. We've got Utah at Oklahoma State. Utah, a 2-point favorite. Cam Rising is back. He had the hand laceration. It sounds like he's back and playing. So Utah is the 2-point favorite.
Man, I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think Utah's going to win, and it's not a big spread. So I think I'm going to go Utah. It does worry me though that it's kind of his first game back. Like it's not the easiest game to step back in after missing last week.
Right. Yeah, I feel like this one I'm going to go with Oklahoma State because they're at home. and I feel like
Yeah.
either team, the home team in this one probably is going to win and cover. But yeah, I'm going to take Oklahoma State, a couple points. I think I saw both quarterbacks, their combined age was older than one of the NFL matchups this
Yes,
week.
I saw that.
That's
Yeah,
so
that's crazy.
that's college football now, right?
Oh man, yeah. Well, make them employees. Maybe they get to stay as long as they want. I don't know how that's gonna work.
Right. Yeah. A little bit later in the, I guess, evening, 6 o'clock, Northwestern goes to Washington. Washington is a 10.5 point favorite. I'm going to take the Huskies. I think they'd be pretty pissed off after losing the Apple Cup the way they did. And I'm just not a huge believer in Northwestern. I think they could keep it close, but in the end, I think Washington can pull away and win by a couple scores.
Yeah, I thought I really liked Northwestern when this opened up at either 12.5 or 12. I think that was big, and I know it's not like the biggest move, but 10.5 just seems like a lot more doable than the 12. Yeah, I'm gonna go Washington. Although you can't sleep on Northwestern. I don't know if Washington respects them or not, but Northwestern's defense is solid, I think. But the secondary has
Yeah.
been a little up and down. So, yeah, I'm gonna go Washington. Dave agrees. Dave Walensky's got Washington beats the spread. So Dave is with us. So if we go down, at least Dave is with us.
There we go. Next, 6:30, Tennessee at Oklahoma. Now an SAC matchup. Tennessee's a
Yeah.
7 point favorite in Norman. That's scary, but I'm going to go
I
Tennessee.
love Tennessee. I almost
Yeah.
made Tennessee my lock, which maybe means Oklahoma
Yeah.
wins. But I had Georgia as my lock last week, and they won by, was it 1 or 2? It was not very many points.
Yeah.
Or was it 4? Anyway, it wasn't a lot.
It was not 24.
Compared to what this. Yes, no, it was not. I like Tennessee. They've just been rolling, and Oklahoma just, I know they are a very defensive sound team, and that Tennessee hasn't played really anybody yet. I just don't. I don't know. I guess it's just the eye test at this point, and I like Tennessee.
Yeah. Yeah, they just show some of these really solid teams have shown some signs of slipping up. Like you just mentioned with Georgia, but yeah, Tennessee hasn't done it yet, especially with a young quarterback. You'd expect a slip up
Yeah.
here or there, but yeah, they've been really impressive. I thought we had one more. Oh, yes. For fun, we've got the Kent State Golden Flashes scuffling at 0-3, coming into Penn State as a 48.5 point dog. And I'm going to take the Nittany Lions.
Here's the thing, Dave. Yeah, exactly. Is Tennessee going to go for the onside kick even if they're up by 50, which is what they just did to the Kent State?
Yeah.
What is Kent State's name?
The Golden Flashes.
Yeah, Golden Flashes. Yeah, that's what they did up by 30 in the second quarter, which is crazy. Yeah, I think this opened at 40 points if I remember correctly. So like a lot of money's coming in on Penn State to hit that 48. And here's the thing: usually I would say like your team gets their butt kicked, they want to bounce back and show something. I just don't think it matters because I think they're not going to be up to play another extremely talented team in Penn State. So, again, the only worry with this one for me is if Penn State's going to lay it on them. It's Golden Eagles. Dave says Golden Eagles for Penn State. I don't know if Penn State's going to want to lay it on them, but that's my only worry. But I am going to go with Penn State after the butt whipping that Penn State got last week. So, again, we agree on that one.
It's really can Penn State score 49? That's it.
Yeah, I completely agree. How quick are they going to call off the dogs? Are going to let Drew Eller test stuff before we get into Big Ten play? All that stuff. So I will say, if you bet it, it could make that game interesting. But not one that's going to be in question. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We didn't cover PJ's presser because there really was not much. We had the Iowa guys on. They covered pretty much everything he said. He gushed about Caleb Johnson. He is a special back, averaging almost 8 yards a carry. there was no Justin Wally injury update. Shocker. Given that they pulled him out right away, I'm guessing he's out this game, but doesn't sound like it's going to be the whole season. But I'm guessing he's not in this game, so that would kind of stink. But we'll see where it goes. We appreciate the support. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Sky U Pod. Please like and subscribe, especially to the YouTube if you are able. We'd appreciate it. It does a lot for us, boost the algorithm, all that jazz. And go ahead, again, check out thecollegehuddle.com. They write articles pretty much on every game. We have mostly every team there with the pod. So even some non-power forward teams are in there as well. So please go check them out. As always, guys, go Gophs, and let's keep Floyd home.